Hello, and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. So in this video, I'm going to be introducing my shed building project. Now, those of you who follow my channel on a regular basis will probably remember that I actually was going to start this project back in the summer of 2020, and then you guys never heard another word on it. And that's because I had to put the project on hold, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So this video is going to be an introduction to the project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the backstory about this project, why I delayed it for over a year, and some basic ideas on how the shed is going to be built and what it's going to look like when it's done. So I've got a playlist created on my channel just for this project and video series. If you're interested in seeing more, there's a link to that playlist up here. So first up, I want to let you guys know that I am by no means a carpenter or an expert in shed building or anything else for that matter. So as you watch through this video series, keep that in mind and know that the point of this video series is not to be a strict how to build a shed, but it's a more of how I'm building a shed. And it's not a definitive guide on what you should do. So keep that in mind if you're going to be working on a project like this. So the backstory of the shed goes something like this. So I've been thinking about building a shed for a few years now, actually ever since we moved into the house 10 years ago. And in the spring of 2020, I finally decided that that was going to be the year that I was going to do the shed. Now at the time, we also wanted to have our front walkway redone. And instead of just the loose gravel that was there, I wanted to put in a nice paver-based walkway. Now that's not something I can really do myself. I just don't have the equipment or the expertise. So I had decided to hire somebody to do that. When the guy was here, I kind of mentioned about the shed project and that I was going to need an area leveled out for a shed. And he said that while he had his equipment here, he would put in a shed pad for me. And it would save me some money because he wouldn't have to come back at a later date and bring all the equipment back. So that's what you see behind me. I've just got a leveled area here in the yard with some gravel on top, and that's going to be the base of the shed. So I thought that within a week or two of this being put in, I'd start building the shed. But right after this was put in, we got some bad news from my wife's doctor. Turns out she found a lump in her throat, and it ended up being thyroid cancer. We really didn't know what the treatment steps were going to be, how long it might take, what types of procedures she would need to undergo, and how much it was going to cost us. So what we ended up doing is deciding to put this project on hold and just focus on her health for the rest of 2020. Now, of course, in 2020, we were also dealing with, C-19. So at the time, there were also some lumber shortages that we were dealing with that might have made getting lumber at that time a little bit difficult anyway. But again, the whole project was on hold anyway, so it didn't matter. I figured the shed pad could just kind of sit here, and when I was ready to start building, we'd build. So for the rest of 2020, we focused on my wife's thyroid treatment. Now, what ended up having to happen is she ended up having to have her thyroid removed, and then some subsequent treatments to make sure that no cancer cells were left in there. And I'm happy to report that as of the spring of 2021, she got a clean bill of health, and the doctors were confident that the cancer cells hadn't spread to anywhere else in her body, and they told us that the nature of thyroid cancer is that it's not a recurring type of thing where once the thyroid is out and the cells are gone, she's got a very good chance of not having any kind of a relapse. Having gotten that news, we decided that it was time to kind of move on with our lives and get back to normal. Well, as normal as we could in the middle of the C-19 pandemic. So as the weather started to warm up in the spring of 2021, I started thinking about the shed again. And then I went to start pricing wood, and I got sticker shock. And as many of you may know, during the spring of 2021, the price of wood and the availability of it was out of control. So again, I decided to just kind of wait until the lumber markets settled down and things were available again. So I waited until July or so of 2021 and started to check price and availability of wood again. And it looks like the price has come down, not to where it was pre-pandemic levels, but I really don't see it getting any lower than it is now. And availability was there. So I decided it was time to pull the trigger and at least get started with the base of the shed. So as you can see behind me here, I've got some lumber. I've got some over there in the driveway, and construction is now underway. So the basic design of the shed is that it's going to be 12 feet wide and 20 feet long. Obviously it's going to sit here on this gravel shed pad on top of 4 stringers or sleepers that will sit right on the gravel bed, and then the floor joists will be on top of the sleepers and so on and so forth from there. Now, I'm not really working from any kind of a set plan. As I go along, I sort of sketch some things out in kind of a crude CAD system that I have available to me just to kind of figure out how much wood I need. But like I said, no set plan. In fact, I don't even have the full kind of design laid out in my head just yet. I wanted to build the base and see how everything kind of laid out before I decided where I was going to put the doors. So I made a video talking about this shed pad and how I wasn't completely happy with it. That was supposed to be the first video in this series, and there is a link to it in the playlist. I'll leave one up here too if you want to see it. But when the shed pad was put in, it didn't come out exactly the way I expected it to. So when the landscaper was here, I showed him kind of where I wanted the shed. He kind of did a quick look at it and he said everything would be okay. He'd be able to level it out. Well, turns out things were sloped here maybe a little bit more than both of us thought. And what he ended up doing was he ended up having to kind of dig into the bank back here, which is not what I expected. I thought the way the land was laid out that it was highest sort of in the middle, kind of right where the camera is, and that he'd be able to build it up around there. But I guess that wasn't the case. Now, I talked about this in the video I made last year about the shed pad, and a lot of people commented on the video. They were concerned that I was going to get water kind of in here because this is sort of below grade, but for whatever reason, the way the land is, the way the water runs off, it's not an issue at all. In fact, we've had tons of rain this July, I think 12 or 13 inches, which is a lot for here in Connecticut, and I've had no issues with standing water at all in here. So we're not going to really have a problem with anything like that, I don't think. The shed base is going to sort of be even, well, maybe a little below grade right here at this back corner. And that's going to cause a little bit of a problem with where I was thinking about putting doors. So my original plan was to have one 6-foot wide door here in the 12-foot wall of the shed. And I've got an area in the yard that I kind of cleared out, and I'd be able to drive my riding mower kind of up here in sort of a sweeping arc and into the side of the shed. But now, because it's going to kind of sit, well, a little below grade, there's going to be sort of a gap here. So it's going to be a little bit weird to kind of do that. Now, I probably can figure something out with building ramps and stuff, or platforms, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that I bridge the gap. But it's not quite the original plan I had, where the shed base was going to be above grade over here, and I'd have sort of a shallow ramp to get up into the shed. So the point of that is, I'm not so sure I want a door here now, because I don't know if it's going to work quite the way that I wanted it to. So I'm not sure how well this is going to translate in the camera, but I've got the camera positioned more or less right at the end of my driveway. So you guys are standing at the edge of the driveway facing up to sort of the 20-foot face of the shed. Another option for my door would be to have it right over here on this side of the shed and have the tractor kind of come straight up onto this side. Now, the reason that I don't want to put it on the middle or over on the far side is that as we move this way, the ground gets a little steeper and funny, and sometimes when I get up here with the tractor, it actually gets a little bit stuck, especially if the grass is tall and wet, the tires will spin. So this side is the best side for the riding tractor. And then the other reason I wanted to keep sort of one of the doors off to one side of the shed rather than sort of in the middle of the long direction is because of the stuff I plan to keep in the shed. I've got 3 kayaks I want to store in there. I've got my dad's old rototiller. I've got a wood chipper and some other things. So I wanted to keep that stuff sort of on one side and keep the other side for the tractors and the lawnmowers and things that I was taking in and out often, and leave the other side for the stuff that didn't get taken in and out as much. And then if we look at the other side of the shed, this still being the 20-foot wall, this side is sort of up above grade, I don't know, 6 or 8 inches or so, and then add the thickness of the shed pad, and we'd have a pretty steep ramp to kind of come in if the door was on this side. And then it's even higher above grade over here. So if I were to try and put a door on this 12-foot wall, it just wouldn't work on this side. So whatever I do decide is going to have to be on that side of the shed. So what I figured I'd do before I committed to the final design of the shed and door and window placement and that sort of thing is I figured I'd build the shed base and then see where everything laid out, and maybe even, you know, put in a temporary ramp and try the lawn tractor onto the base and see how everything lays out. Once I can see it and touch it and feel it, then I can solidify my door placement and move on with the rest of the design and build. So because it's not directly related to construction, I'll talk about the permitting process in this video. Now, in my town here in Connecticut, I need to get a building permit to build a shed. And I went on the town's website, did a little reading. They have a nice pamphlet that they wrote up for people so that they kind of know what to expect and what they need to do to get a permit to build a shed. So I kind of read through that, and from what I saw, it was worded a little bit ambiguously, but it looked to me like I would need to pay $80 in 2021 to get a permit to build a shed. So I started clicking links and found out that they had put their process online, went through the process, filled out the application, and when I hit submit, it told me that they would contact me and tell me what I needed to pay, which I was kind of confused about because the pamphlet online told me I needed to pay $80. Well, anyway, the next day I got a phone call from the zoning office, and they told me that I needed to pay $170 for a building permit and a zoning permit, and that I needed to go to a separate health department office in a neighboring town and pay them $50 to make sure that I wasn't building my shed on top of my septic tank. So even though I thought I had done my research on the permits and had budgeted for that, I guess I was wrong. So moral of the story here is that I should have just picked up the phone and called the town and asked them instead of relying on the information on the website, which was either out of date or just incomplete. So unfortunately, the permitting process put me a little bit over budget on this stage, but what are you going to do? So I guess that's it for the intro. In the next video, you're going to see me actually building the shed base. So make sure you check that out if you're interested. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. If you'd like to support my channel in another way, please consider visiting my Amazon store, which is linked in the description below. Thanks for watching.